Hi, everybody. I am Mike Merryman-Lotze. I work with the American Friends Service Committee as their Middle East Program Director. I'm calling in from Philadelphia. So this is the second of AFSC's regular Thursday at 4 Facebook Live events with different staff. I'm on the second time. If you missed last week's discussion with my colleague Kristen Crump, take a time to check out the video of her talk about our work on immigration and immigration rights. They've been doing some really impressive work over the last weeks responding to the COVID-19 crisis, pushing for protection for people in ICE detention, pushing against the threatened immigration ban that's being pushed now, working for the rights of all migrants, both here and in other parts of the world. So as I said, these events will be happening over the next few weeks, every Thursday. And I'm going to be talking today about some of the work that we do in Israel and Palestine, as well as touching on some of the ways that we're pushing for change here in the U.S. For those who missed it at the beginning, I'm Mike Merryman-Lotze. I work with AFSC in Philadelphia as the Middle East Program Director. So I coordinate very closely with all of the staff that we have in Jordan and Israel and Palestine, as well as the staff here in the U.S. Working on policy and advocacy issues as well. And I'm seeing a number of colleagues from all around the country and around the world. Firas from Gaza is on, Jennifer from Chicago, Pedro in San Diego. Thank you all for joining us. Others, if you can add maybe where you're watching from into the chat, continue to add information as we go along. I'm going to try and take some questions. So if you have an ability to put questions into the chat as you're watching, I'll try and answer some of those questions as we go along, trying to add some content and respond to what it is that you're all saying and bringing up. Just as we start, it's been really amazing as I've been working here from home, seeing the responses of my AFSC colleagues all over the world as we've been coming together to respond to the COVID-19 crisis in various ways. As I said, Kristen talked last week about the work that we're doing here in the U.S. on immigration, pushing for protection for those in detention and for the rights of immigrant communities. Our healing justice staff working on prison issues have been also doing amazing work, pushing for protection for those who are in prison and in detention and for their release. Globally also, we've just launched a COVID-19 response that has been calling for assistance for AFSC for the various programs that we're doing all around the world who are responding to the COVID-19 crisis. This morning, our team in Jordan sent me some pictures of the response that they're doing there. The Jordan staff have been providing personal protection equipment for first-line responders in Jordan who are reaching out and working with communities who are impacted by the COVID-19 virus. But we also have responses in other parts of the world. So in Zimbabwe and Mexico, we've also started responses and are looking at how we respond in Myanmar and other locations. But the focus of what I'm going to be talking about today is our work in Israel and Palestine. And there we've also just started an emergency response program providing assistance to people in Gaza and the West Bank at risk of infection from COVID-19. The staff in Gaza yesterday and today were packing up boxes of personal protective equipment and cleaning and other supplies to provide to elderly residents of Gaza who are at risk from the COVID-19 virus. And you can find out more about that response and some of the work that we're doing on the Gaza Unlocked website. That's a campaign that we've been running here in the U.S. to call attention to the situation in Gaza and the blockade, as well as to push for a change in U.S. policy on Gaza. On that website, there is a link where you can give donations to that emergency response. You can also give to that response through going to the website afsc.org/give to Gaza. And we recognize obviously that the COVID-19 virus is impacting every community, and there's not a single place in the world that's not been impacted by COVID-19. And so I think one of the questions some have asked is why Gaza and why a particular focus there. And really what we're looking at as we respond to Gaza is the fact that because of the blockade that's been in place for the last 13 years, there are particular vulnerabilities in Gaza that don't exist in other places. And if COVID-19 begins to spread through the community in a way that's uninhibited, the impacts and devastation that it can bring there are going to be really hard to fathom. The impact of the 13 years of blockade in Gaza has been immense. Last fall, I was in Gaza and had an opportunity to visit the Shifa hospital and talk with some of the doctors there. Even before this crisis, those hospitals were out of 40 to 50% of the basic medical supplies and equipment that they need to function. There are only a couple of hundred ICU beds and only 60 or so ventilators in all of Gaza for 2 million people. But it's not just a lack of medical facilities. Really, many of the basic protective protections that we have here are things that are not present there. So social distancing, which is something that we've seen in many places here and around the world, is really not possible in Gaza. It's one of the most densely populated places on Earth. But beyond just the dense population, some of the impacts of the siege, the lack of electricity, the lack of water, make it a place where social distancing is impossible. Here, one of the things that many of us have done to avoid going out more than we need is we've gone and we've stocked up on groceries, so you only have to go out once a week or so. But when you only have 4 hours of electricity a day, stocking up on groceries is not something that you can do when 96% of the water in Gaza is undrinkable. You don't have a place where you can wash your hands and stay clean. In a place where unemployment is over 50% and 80% of the population is dependent on food aid and assistance from outside, it's really impossible to go out and buy personal protective equipment or even sanitation materials that are needed to maybe help yourself and stay clean in this situation. And so what we've been doing is putting together kits that include face masks, hand sanitizer, soap, cleaning materials, and other things, and we're delivering those to some of the families that are most in need in Gaza. So these are people like a man named Salah, who I met last fall when I was in Gaza. He's somebody who we assisted last fall. He's in his mid-70s. He worked throughout his life as a day laborer, but he's reached a point when he can no longer work as a laborer. His home was destroyed twice during previous attacks into Gaza. He lives in the north of Gaza near the separation wall that divides Gaza from Israel, an area that was heavily attacked during previous wars. And so he now squats on government-owned land, living in a home made of cinder blocks and corrugated tin. And he lives there with some of his sons and their extended families and others, and none of them are currently employed. And so the response is trying to give him and others like him who are particularly vulnerable in this situation assistance that can help them stay safe, as well as to give them information on the coronavirus and information that they need. In the West Bank, we're also starting a response. There we'll be working in what are called Area C communities. These are the 60% of the West Bank that remains under Israeli control. The communities that are in those parts of the West Bank are largely rural and herder communities, communities without also access to many of the resources that other parts of the West Bank have. I used to work in some of those communities before I was with AFSC, when I worked with Save the Children. And they are communities that have no running water, have no electricity, have no medical clinics. In normal situations, there are mobile medical clinics that go out to those communities and provide them with assistance. But in this current situation, movement restrictions means that those mobile medical clinics can't reach the communities. It also means that the people in those communities can't move to major cities to access the markets, and they can't sell their goods. So in addition to basic medical needs, there's also a need for food, and there's also a need for other non-food item assistance. So in the West Bank, we're starting to coordinate our assistance with other organizations who are providing those packets, as well as with the United Nations, to ensure that communities that otherwise are not reached can receive some basic assistance and protection. So is ongoing, and if you want to learn more, as I said, you can go to the Gaza Unlocked website, or also to the and if you want to give a donation, it's to afsc.org/give to Gaza. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to put them into the chat, and I'll try to answer those questions as quickly as I can, to see what I can say. In addition to the work that we're doing in emergency response, one of the major programs that we run as a part of our Palestine and Israel work here in the U.S. is a campaign called No Way to Treat a Child. And that campaign is calling attention to the situation of Palestinian children in military detention. At any one time, there are several hundred Palestinian children in detention. They're held in a military court system that does not provide them with the basic protections that they need. Children are interrogated without lawyers, often subject to both physical and verbal abuse, kept in prisons where their families can't visit them, and tried in a court system controlled by the military that has a 99.7% conviction rate. So there is no justice in that system. We run that campaign with our partner, Defense for Children International, Palestine, and right now there's a petition that they have up that is calling for the release of all Palestinian children who are held in military detention. And so my colleague Jennifer has put that into the chat. And if you'd like to go and sign that petition, we'd really appreciate your support in that way. In addition to those programs, we also do work here on accountability through calling for an end to in corporate complicity in human rights violations in Israel and Palestine. Much of our work is focused on supporting campaigns around the country that are part of the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, which seek to aim to end corporate complicity in violations in Israel and Palestine. Much of our work for that can be found on the Investigate website that AFSC runs out of its economic justice program. So in addition to calling for economic justice in Israel and Palestine. That website also crosses over and looks at issues of ICE detention and immigration rights. It looks at the private prison industry, and it's a really useful tool for finding out where it is that you're invested and how it is that you can invest your resources in a way that is both responsible and not complicit in human rights abuses. If there are any questions, be happy to take them, and if anybody has them. The Palestine team consists response, and that we're doing is also working to continue the program work that they do. So our Palestine program's main work is a program called Palestinian Youth Together for Change, and that program works with young adult Palestinian activists in the West Bank and inside Gaza and inside Israel, and brings them together to look at how they can work for social and political change within Palestinian society and how they can support those efforts. We just started a new phase of that program in January, and obviously it's been disrupted, as so many things have been, by this current situation. But they're really pushing for change. So there was a question in the chat about, is there anything happening in Congress in regard to support for Palestinian rights? And there's actually quite a bit. Yesterday, I was on, or Monday, I suppose, I was on a call with a staff member from the Senate Foreign Relations Committee who'd requested a meeting with a number of faith organizations about the situation in Palestine and in Gaza. He's part of a growing chorus of Congress members who are pushing for a resumption of aid to Palestine. The Trump administration last year cut off all assistance to the Palestinian Authority as well as to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, and resuming that aid is some of the most important, is incredibly important for the current situation. And we're hoping to have a meeting with some of the House tomorrow to also talk about that issue. In February, we'd worked very closely with Representative Mark Bocan and Representative Debbie Dingell on a letter that they put forward calling for an end to the siege of Gaza and for a resumption of aid. And I know that our partners at American Muslims for Palestine and the U.S. campaign and JVP have just helped to also push out a letter that Representative Dingell also led on, that's calling for an immediate resumption of aid to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency. And supporting those efforts is really critical. UNRWA in particular is on the verge of losing critical support, and that they as an agency provide both education and medical care for tens of thousands of Palestinians in the West Bank and in Gaza, and they risk having to close some of those services at this time if there isn't additional funding coming in. And so we are continuing all of that work. I can say that our Israel program is also our Israel program director, Sahar Vardi, has been working on some of the challenges of the ways in which responses to this current crisis have been militarized, and looking at that, as well as what some of the responses are in Israeli society. Going back to Congress, I see Jennifer has also said that there is also the House Resolution 2407 on Palestinian children's rights. That's the bill that we've also helped introduce with our partners at DCI on the status of Palestinian children in military detention. It's pushing to ensure that no U.S. funding goes to the detention, to support the detention of Palestinian children. And if you can support that initiative, that's also really important. It's been a lot, and I think I'm coming up on the end of the time that I've been allotted, but really appreciate all of the people who have joined, and again, check out our website, Gaza Unlocked. From there, you can look at some information on the blog about the current response that we're doing in Gaza. There's a link there to be able to give. Again, that's afsc.org/give to Gaza if you want to donate to our response. And there's also an action page there where you can take action to push for an end to the blockade and other things. So we really appreciate the time that you've given to us, and thank you for your support for all of the work that we do at AFSC.